Yeah, man, my name is Jimmy. I come from Jamaica, bro. I'm gonna sing Motto Vu. Oh, 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 oh. Motto Vu, Ohalecha Yaakov. משכנותיך ישראל, מה טובו אוהליך יעקב. משכנותיך ישראל. This comes from the portion of Balak. Bilam thinks he's gonna curse Israel, but really in the end his plan derails into nothing in the end, blessing Israel. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Bilam thinks he's bad, he's really good, because he blessed Israel instead of putting them in a bad mood. He did not curse them, he did bless them. He blessed them with these words: מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Yo, Bilam did not curse Israel, he ended up blessing them with the following words: מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. He talked to a donkey, beat it up. He beat it up, but the donkey still loved him a lot and told him a lot. But he ended up being bad. He never turned a new leaf. He ended up being a villain forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Everybody listen, gather around. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Listen to those words. Research them. The translation in English, they are good. Good words Bilam spoke, but he meant to curse Israel. He ended up blessing them instead. The donkey helped a lot, but he still ended up being bad. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו, מה טובו, מה טובו, מה טובו אוהליך, אוהליך. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל.
Well, Shavua Tov, everyone, and welcome on behalf of Avatami Ministries and Yeshivat Shuvu. My name is Maasei Jackson Edwards, and we are coming to a very special broadcast with you today. It is Havdalah and Maasei HaShlichim. The Havdalah is the separation service, the very small liturgical service, which separates the Shabbat from the rest of the days of the week And then we go right into Maasei HaShlichim, the deeds of the sent ones, the deeds of the apostles. And this is where we are looking together verse by verse and line by line at the book of Acts. We're so glad you're here with us, and we want you to like and share this broadcast. We're coming very close now to the Havdalah service. I want to mention a few things. A week ago was Remnant 2022, the Supernatural Remnant Conference. If you were able to attend in person, we know it was a huge blessing, and even online. But if you still want to be able to get those videos and get the teachings from the Remnant Conference, you can order them if you just send an email to info@avatami.org. And let us know that you want to have the teachings. You can get those for the live streaming fee of $75. So just let us know, and we'll be able to get those to you, and you will be extremely blessed. It really has the entire conference on it. All of the breakout sessions, all of the live stream sections, all of that is being made available to you for a very, very small fee. So we highly, highly recommend that you email us info@avatami.org. And be able to get those videos and to be able to learn alongside everyone that was there at the conference. For me personally, it was an enormous blessing to be there, to see everyone in person, and to see that there's some people, different teachers there that didn't necessarily have the exact same view on certain things, but at the same time we were together in unity, and we were learning in unity, and that we found that the common ground between us was so much greater than the things that we could find that would divide us. And so I just hope that you will also feel that and be blessed with these teachings that we're making available to you. We are operating solely based on your support. And so if you want to get involved with the global work, you can do so at a few different places. I'll mention a couple of them. Fundly.com/bshuvu. That's BSHUVU. Beit Shuvu is an initiative of raising 2 synagogues in Zimbabwe. This is something that you can be a part of history with, in being able to donate and be able to see these 2 synagogues as the first Messianic synagogues in the whole country to be raised and to be operated by our good friends in Zimbabwe who are partnering with us. And so we do hope that you partner with us and with them to be able to raise these synagogues. And also Operation Kiruv. This is a worldwide project as we are able to help the global work. And so Operation Kiruv, you can go to fundly.com/Kiruv, KIRUV, Kiruv, and we'll also put the links in the chat for you as well. We're coming now to Havdalah, and as I like to say, when we enter into Shabbat with Lechadodi, we say the words Sof Maasei b'machshava techila. It's the last in deed, but the first in thought. So the Shabbat, it exists in time at the end, but it exists in the mind at the beginning. And so as we are concluding Shabbat together, we are already planning for and preparing for the coming Shabbat. We do not prepare for Shabbat on Shabbat. We prepare for Shabbat as soon as one Shabbat ends. We are already preparing ourselves for this coming Shabbat, the Shabbat being a picture of redemption. And we do not wait for the redemption to come to us, but we hasten that redemption. We hasten the Shabbat in essence. And so we say that those who do not labor do not eat on Shabbat. And so if we are not actively doing the mitzvot during the week and actively looking toward and anticipating and doing the things that is going to bring the holy Shabbat, if we are not doing those things, then we will not be able to enjoy the Shabbat. And so at this time in Havdalah, we remember, Sof Maasei b'machshava techila. In the mind, Shabbat is first. Yeshuati Evtach velo evchad Ki ozi v'zimrat Yadonai Vayehi li Yeshua Ushavtem mayim besason B'manei HaYeshua L'Adonai HaYeshua L'Amecha תפארתך סלע, אדוני צבאות עמנו, נשגב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע. אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך, אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו יום כהנו ליהודים. הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר כן תהיה לנו, כוס ישועות עשיו בשם אדוני אקרא. צברי מננן ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן, מורה פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא מיני ושמים, בורא מיני ושמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא מאורי האש, בורא מאורי האש. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי וששת ימי המעשה, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לחול. לחיים. שבוע טוב, 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 שבוע טוב. We are looking forward to the coming of Eliyahu Hanavi, and we know that right behind Eliyahu Hanavi is Mashiach ben David. So when Eliyahu comes to the door on Pesach, we expect behind him to be Yeshua ben David, Yeshua HaMashiach. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaGiladi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaGiladi, B'meha yavo Eleinu Mashiach, Mashiach ben David, B'mhecha yavo Eleinu Mashiach, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaGiladi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaGiladi, B'meha yavo Eleinu Mashiach, Mashiach ben David, B'meha yavo Eleinu Mashiach, Mashiach ben David, B'meha yavo Eleinu Mashiach, Mashiach ben David, B'meha yavo Eleinu Mashiach, Mashiach ben David. Amen. I have the great pleasure now of welcoming Mora Devorah Kalik, who has a very special message for us as we continue our study on the book of Acts. I'm welcoming now Devorah, and we can't wait to hear what you have to teach all of us tonight. Shavua Tov, everyone, and let's welcome Mora Devorah.
Shavua Tov, everyone. My name is Devorah Kalik, and I want to thank Rabbi Shapira for this opportunity to be with you tonight as we kick off the start to a new week. As I said, my name's Devorah Kalik, and I'm a student of Rabbi Itzhak Shapira and a graduated student from Yeshivat Shuvu. And I'm going to be your teacher this evening for this chapter of Maasei HaShlichim, the book of Acts. I've titled this week's lesson, "And Shaul Remained for Some Time." Okay, and I'm going to read to you our verses, starting at verse 17 to 28. They all grabbed Sosthenes, the president of the synagogue, and gave him a beating in full view of the bench, but Gallio showed no concern whatsoever. Shaul remained for some time, then said goodbye to the brothers and sisters and sailed off to Syria after having his hair cut short in Cenchrea, because he had taken a vow. With him were Priscilla and Aquila. They came to Ephesus, and he left them there, but he himself went into the synagogue and held dialogue with the Jews. When they asked him to stay with them longer, he declined. However, in his farewell, he said, "God willing, I will come back to you." Then he set sail from Ephesus. After landing at Caesarea, which in Hebrew we say is Caesarea, he went up to Yerushalayim and greeted the Messianic community. Then he came down to Antioch, spent some time there, and afterwards set out and passed systematically through the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the Talmudim. Meanwhile, a Jewish man named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent speaker with a thorough knowledge of the Tanakh. This man had been informed about the way of the Lord, and with great spiritual fervor, he spoke and taught accurately the facts about Yeshua, but he knew only the immersion of Yochanan. He began to speak out boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God in fuller detail. When he made plans to cross over into Achaia, the brothers encouraged him and wrote the Talmidim there to welcome him. On arrival, he greatly helped those who through grace had come to trust, for he powerfully and conclusively refuted the unbelieving Jews in public, demonstrating by the Tanakh that Yeshua is the Messiah. Well, tonight, as I said, we're looking at these verses, but as we learn through Jewish study, in order to get the context, it's important to go backwards. When it comes to discussing Rav Shaul, it's always important to remember what Shimon Kepha, or Peter, wrote in his second letter, 2 Peter 3:16, that, quote, "Some of the things Shaul writes are difficult to understand," meaning they can be twisted and distorted by those who are ignorant of the matters on which he writes. Of course, Rav Shaul was well learned and is known in the Brit HaDashah, or the New Testament, for being a master in the use of midrash. Midrash is rooted in the word darash, which means to search out. Therefore, midrash is a type of literature that probes the text, looking at what is behind the text and even beyond the text, investigating and interpreting the meaning, the ethics, and ideas governing these, let's say, religious matters. Midrash uses storytelling and is similar to the parables which Yeshua told. Did you know that there are close to 700 references quoted from the Tanakh in the New Testament, including many midrashim, midrashim meaning the plural of midrash. It is important for us to understand that in this way, the Brit HaDashah, or the New Testament, validates the Hebrew Scriptures, or what we usually call the Tanakh. As David Stern comments, this shows us that its writers, meaning of the Brit HaDashah, were convinced that although God had done something unique and radically new in Yeshua, the meaning of what he had done could be adequately expressed only in relation to the Tanakh. I agree with David Stern. We need to keep this in mind, my friends, whenever we read and study in the Brit HaDashah. As we move through the chapters in Maasei HaShlichim, the book of Acts, we will see that although some Jews became convinced that Yeshua was the promised Jewish Messiah through the Shlichim, the disciples or emissaries, when it came to Rav Shaul's teachings, most became agitated and upset. Some even became violent, causing him and some of the believers, the brothers rather, to leave and travel elsewhere. At the end of chapter 17, we see just such a situation in Berea. The Bereans were more receptive, and as it says in Acts 17, 11, and 12, and I quote, they eagerly welcomed the message, checking the Tanakh every day to see if the things Shaul was saying were true. Many of them came to trust, as did a number of prominent Greek women, and not only a few Greek men. Well, sadly, more problems arose there in Berea from some Jews which came down from Thessalonica. Sorry, I have a little bit of trouble with Greek words. And Shaul ended up in Athens, which is where we find him after he was chased out of Berea in Acts 17:16. He would go to the synagogue on Shabbat, and he would teach daily in the market square. He did have some success in Athens, but it came at the expense of some trouble when some Greek philosophers brought him up in front of the High Council of Athens to defend his strange new teachings. Once he mentioned the resurrection of the dead, his ability to defend his position fell totally on deaf ears, and he had to leave the meeting. However, some came to trust in Yeshua, and one of them was a high council member named Dionysus. Also, there was a woman named Damaris, along with some others who came to faith. According to tradition, Dionysus became the leader of a messianic community in Athens. And you can find this in the book on church history written by Eusebius, and it's in chapter 3.4.11 and 4.23.3. At the beginning of chapter 18, we have Rav Shaul in Corinth, where he meets Aquila and Priscilla, who had been expelled from Rome because of a decree by Claudius. They were tent makers like him, and so, as it says in Acts 18:3, he stayed with them and worked with them. The following Shabbat, we find Rav Shaul once again in the synagogue. This is his custom, and where he can find his Jewish brethren gathered together on the Shabbat, and it was his opportunity to share the Besorah, the good news about Messiah, with his precious people. Since the time when Rav Shaul was ordained by the Jerusalem brethren to go out to the Gentiles, this of course takes place in Acts 13, his love for and devotion to his people is evident. Whether in Berea, Athens, Corinth, Iconium, or elsewhere, his passion and fervent commitment to sharing the Besorah is clear, with the Jews first, and also to the God-fearing Gentiles. No matter what persecution or conflict arose because of the message, Rav Shaul never gave up or walked away from his ordained divine mission. In Acts 18:17, we begin in the midst of a situation of great turmoil, where we read, they all grabbed Sosthenes, the president of the synagogue, and gave him a beating in full view of the bench. But Gallio showed no concern whatever. Who is they? Who is Sosthenes, and why were they beating him? Well, we know he's the president, meaning the synagogue ruler, also known as the Nasi. But we don't know why he was grabbed and given a beating. And who is Gallio? Here is that context problem again. What in the world is going on here? We have to go backwards in the text to find out. We're going to learn that sometimes there's a great benefit for us to learn in going backwards. We already know, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that Rav Shaul is in Corinth. In verse 12, it says that when Gallio became the Roman governor of Achaia, the believing Jews made a concerted attack on Shaul and took him to court. Now we know that Gallio was the governor of a Roman province called Achaia, and Corinth was a city in that province. This area today is in the southern part of Greece. We know from verse 13 that Shaul was being accused of trying to persuade people to worship God in ways that violate the Torah. It's presumed that the non-believing Jews of the synagogue, led by Sosthenes, brought Shaul to court. In verse 14, Shaul was about to defend himself when the Roman governor dismissed the case because he understood this matter to be about Jewish law, not Roman law. That's from verses 15 and 16. Subsequently, we arrive in our starting verse, in verse 17. They grabbed Sosthenes. But who grabbed him and beat him, and why? According to David Stern, this is uncertain. He says either the other Jews did this to Sosthenes because he had led them into public humiliation because, of course, of Gallio's dismissal, or observing that Gallio, the governor, was not interfering, the Greeks proceeded to indulge their anti-Jewish feelings against the synagogue ruler. Either way, we can see what a volatile situation this was. And yet, excuse me, in Acts 18:18, we read, Shaul remained, of course in Corinth, for some time, and then said goodbye to the brothers and sailed off to Syria after having his hair cut short in Cenchrea, because he had taken a vow. With him were Priscilla and Aquila. We know that from verse 11, Shaul had been with the Corinthians for 1.5 years. In spite of all the problems he experienced, including the most recent violent one from our text, we read that Shaul remained for some time. I love what David Stern writes on this verse. Except where his own life was in immediate peril, Shaul never left at a time of crisis or under duress. Again, we see his commitment. This is what we call in Hebrew mesirut nefesh, which means the deepest kind of devotion and self-sacrifice. We see through his example that he consistently was willing to give his life for the Besorah and the kingdom. And of course, we know that he was eventually executed in Rome. I actually am going to digress from our text in Acts and share something with you for the rest of our study, which, in my opinion, might be the greatest benefit of Rav Shaul's avodah. Excuse me, I live in a very, very dry climate now in Las Cruces, and so my throat gets dry all the time. Well, this is something which, to my recollection, is not discussed very much, this thing I'm going to talk about. Yet, it is something he taught that not only applies to all the kehilot or congregations that he planted, but is also still applicable to us today. This instruction for us came out of a great deal of pain from all of his trials and difficulties, and he left this behind for us in his letter to the Corinthians, in his first letter to the Corinthians. We find it in chapter 7, verses 17 to 20. Shaul called it my rule and said it was for all the congregations he planted. Let's go there and read it together. I'm reading from the Complete Jewish Bible. Only let each person live the life the Lord has assigned him, and live it in the condition he was in when God called him. This is the rule I lay down for all the congregations. Was someone already circumcised when he was called? Then he should not try to remove the marks of circumcision. Was someone uncircumcised when he was called? He shouldn't undergo Brit Milah. Being circumcised means nothing, and being uncircumcised means nothing. What does it mean? What does mean something is keeping God's commandments. Each person should remain in the condition he was in when he was called. Well, there's a whole lot to unpack here, and we must unpack it because, as I mentioned earlier, Shimon Kefa wrote that some of the things Rav Shaul writes are difficult to understand and can be twisted in their meaning. This is definitely one of those things. What does Rav Shaul mean when he says, "Let each person live the life the Lord has assigned him and live it in the condition he was in when God called him"? I agree with David Stern, who points out that this rule applies in two different conditions: being Jewish or Gentile, which is clarified in verses 18 to 20, and being enslaved or free, clarified in verses 21 to 24. And if there is any doubt, Rav Shaul repeats at the end of each of these two sections in verses 20 and 24, quote, "Each person should remain in the condition he was in when he was called." He doesn't state this again with regard to any other conditions. In other words, we should not seek any unnecessary change in our religious, social, or economic status. Why would Shaul instruct us in this way? Why would he call it his rule for all? And if we take Shaul's writing seriously, if the Brit Hadashah is to be viewed as written under the inspiration of the Ruach HaKodesh, then it follows that this rule is also for us today, right? Why would he write this? Because, dear friends, brothers and sisters, seeking a change to the condition in which we were called steals precious time away from our avodah, our service to Hashem. It takes away precious time from the focus of our existence, which is to grow into our fullness by doing mitzvot and making the Torah our business, as Rabbi Shapira has pointed out to us many, many, many times. Next, what does Shaul mean by, quote, "being circumcised is nothing and being uncircumcised means nothing"? Well, on the surface, this sounds kind of anti-Semitic, even like a slap in the face against the Jewish people. Not so. What is meant here, in context, is that in the Messianic community, Jews and Gentiles have equal standing before God. Now, you can check this out for yourselves in 1 Corinthians 12:13, Romans 3:22 and 23, and also verses 29 and 30, Galatians 3:28, Galatians 5:6, and Galatians 6:15, and in Colossians 3:11. I love how David Stern explains this. He says, on this matter, ethnic ties, cultural expressions, customs, and social or religious status have no bearing. In this regard, being Jewish or Gentile does not matter. What matters is keeping God's commandments. Let me further clarify. Rav Shaul is not saying there is no longer any distinction between Jews or Gentiles. Obviously, there are still people who are from the nations, and there are those who are enslaved in this world, and there is still a distinction between male and female. he is speaking rather about our status as believers in the Messiah Yeshua, that we are all equal before God. Now, I'm about to delve into a really hot topic, controversial. I can imagine that this might be raising some questions in some of your minds. With regards to religious status, I'm well aware that conversion has become one of the issues of our day. I'm speaking of a legal conversion to Judaism. Is Shaul saying no Gentile should ever convert legally to Judaism? Are there any exceptions to this rule? Yes, of course, there are always exceptions, but the exceptions are rare and not the norm. In my opinion, this is a serious issue and should first be discussed in depth with a trusted and knowledgeable Jewish Messianic rabbi. And honestly, if I may be frank and truthful with you all, I know of only two who I would trust, and you see them both each week here on Ahavat Ami Virtual Synagogue. In addition to that, you must have a very good and biblically sound and valid reason for conversion. If I may be frank again, from what I have learned by talking to many, many people, simply wanting to live in Israel is not a valid biblical reason. Having said all this, I find it ironic that Rav Shaul fought so hard for those of us who were not born Jewish, so that we wouldn't have to legally convert. That's because he understood better than anyone that what really matters is removing that barrier that exists over our hearts, the barrier which keeps us from truly understanding the Torah and through it, how to come closer to God. That barrier also keeps us from understanding our true identity in Messiah. The key here is that we need to be like our father Abraham, who left his gods, his family, and his country, and he crossed over the river Euphrates to go to the land that God showed him. We just read this in Parashat Lech Lecha. The word for crossed over is the word avar, and it means physically that he crossed over the river Euphrates. This word avar presents us with a metaphor for conversion when we cross over from the kingdom of darkness to God's kingdom, the kingdom of light. The Midrash Rabbah does explain that this is why Abraham, or Avraham in Hebrew, is called a Hebrew or Ivri, because he crossed over, as I said earlier, the Euphrates physically. Ivri is from the same root as avar. An Ivri is someone who has had that same inner transformation as Avraham, the conversion of the soul, if you will. Shaul called it a brit lev, circumcision of the heart. Having the status of being legally Jewish means nothing without that. That is why Rav Shaul also explained in Romans 9, verses 6 and 7, quote, "For not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel, and not all are children of Avraham just because they are his offspring," meaning his physical offspring. He was explaining to both Jews and Gentiles that the physicality and legality of being Jewish is not enough to make us children of Abraham or members of Israel. Even those who are descended from Abraham must still have a circumcision of the heart. It is that inner transformation taking place at the level of the soul which changes our identity and status before God. Let me prove it to you another way. I want to read to you from Rabbi Shapira's newest book, The Rivka Remnant. But before I do, I need to explain the context. Rabbi explains that the Torah is from heaven. It is heavenly in its nature. And the Torah which we now have, which was given to Israel through Moses on Mount Sinai, pales, yes, I said pales, in comparison to the Torah that exists in heaven. It's not that the Torah in heaven is physically different, Rabbi Shapira talks about. It's not that it's physically different from the one here on earth, but rather our understanding of the Torah that we have pales in comparison to what there is to understand from the heavenly Torah. Those deeper meanings, which we will learn from Messiah. But we only have that Torah, that physical Torah that was given to Israel, which came, as Rabbi Shapira writes, in the language of men. Of course, we must do our very best to understand the Torah that was given and bring it down to others through studying and learning and teaching so that others can also understand it and learn how to use the Torah as a tool to make their own personal connection with God. Rabbi Shapira writes about all this. Now I will read from pages 26 and 27 of the Rivka Remnant. Quote, unfortunately, many people today gain great knowledge about Torah, Judaism, rabbinic interpretation, and much more. Yet they miss the mark in unlocking the Torah as a practical tool for their lifestyle and personal connection with God. The Torah was never intended, he writes, to be a theological tool, but rather a tool that alters our lifestyle, our relationship with Him, and even more importantly, our relationship with others. The decision to circumcise our heart comes prior, or at least in parallel, to our decision to bring down the Torah, just as the prophet Jeremiah declared in Jeremiah 4:4, circumcise your hearts to the Lord, remove the thickening about your hearts. I'm skipping on a little, and Rabbi then quotes Rav Shaul in Romans 2:25, which says, for circumcision is indeed of value if you do what Torah says. But if you are a transgressor of Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. Rabbi then writes, quote, Rav Shaul's point is clear. A person who approaches the Torah with a circumcised heart toward God and their fellow man will receive great benefit and life from it, because he will be able to understand the Torah correctly. However, if one approaches the Torah without a circumcised heart, he will misunderstand and misinterpret the Torah to the point that the Torah will actually harm him. Unquote. Now we can better understand why Rav Shaul said circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing. It is not the physicality of being Jewish or Gentile which matters. Rather, it is the transformation of the inner heart, the inner man, if you will. That is what really matters to God and changes our status before Him. There's much more that Rabbi teaches us in the book, and you really and truly need to read the Rivka Remnant. If you have read it, read it again and again and again until these astounding truths in this precious and so very prophetic book are internalized in your kishkas, in your guts, in your deepest inner essence. I'm doing that as well. I'm on my third time. Well, to close this matter, if any of you are still thinking about a legal conversion in the strongest possible terms, I urge you to listen to Rav Shaul's words on this matter. I shared many of the scripture references which prove that Jews and Gentiles have equal standing before God when they circumcise their hearts and go through the process of that inner soul transformation, just like Avraham did. In addition to that, please join Yeshivat Shuvu and at least get a good Jewish education. The proper biblical view from what is written in the Torah, the prophets, and yes, even the Brit HaDashah, and affirmed by our Jewish sages on this topic of conversion will become crystal clear to you. Then you will be armed with a wealth of information and the proper understanding in order to make a good decision. Well, to summarize, Acts 18:18 tells us that Shaul remained for some time. This was referring to how long he remained in Corinth. That time was 18 months, 1.5 years, where he poured his life into the Jews and Gentiles there before he said goodbye and sailed off to Antioch, in Syria, to help the brethren there. He must have loved those Corinthians in spite of all the problems which he faced there. Why was Shaul willing to suffer for the Corinthians and other people in the all the kehilot that he planted? Why was he willing to suffer abuse and ridicule and being chased out of town in most of the places that he went? Because he knew that his suffering would bring him into his fullness. And as Rabbi Shapira has taught us through the words of our Chazal, he understood that his suffering would help those he taught to understand that suffering can be a good thing because it has the potential to bring us into our fullness. He fought for them to have the Torah which had been revealed to him from the Messiah. He left a precious legacy for them, and he left a precious legacy for us. He brought down the Torah for them. This means he toiled and suffered to bring down the heavenly reality of the Torah to them on the earth. He was teaching them, as Rabbi Shapira wrote, in the language of men, so they'd be able to embrace and take hold of the Torah in strength, the tool that was able to transform their lives because of the Torah's heavenly nature, enabling them to understand how to make their own personal connection with God. And Rav Shaul still teaches us today with that same passion and love born out of his own pain and suffering. All his letters are rich in instruction for how to live godly and devoted lives to our God in the merit of Messiah and in the power of his Spirit, even during our own periods of suffering. In my opinion, Rav Shaul has left us with much more than a legacy of words and letters. Perhaps, just maybe, he received a deeper understanding of the heavenly nature of the Torah when he met the Messiah that day on the road to Damascus. And perhaps he's already shared with us some of that revelation of those deeper things revealed to him by the Messiah from the Torah in heaven through his words and letters. I believe if we follow those instructions that he left for us in words and letters, we too will receive a deeper revelation that will help us to bring down some of that heavenly reality to others. His words and letters have life in them. His instructions and the rule he left for us have life in them. They were inspired by the Ruach HaKodesh. I think it will help us to remember that Rav Shaul was an ordinary man. And yet, because of his passion and devotion to live out the commandments of the Torah and to bring the message of the Torah and the Messiah to others, even while in the midst of pain and suffering, he was used by God and he became extraordinary. Rav Shaul left us a great gift in words and letters which came straight from heaven. In one sense, Rav Shaul has remained with us, and for a much, much longer time than the 1.5 years that he spent in Corinth. We are very blessed to have what he has left for us, and his words and letters must never be taken for granted. Before I close in prayer, I want to share a personal note. The scriptures are rich and deep, and they are richer and deeper than most of us have been taught. I imagine that most of you watching tonight are like me. We have come into this new understanding of the Jewishness of our faith from the church. We've come from the church, we've come out of the church, whatever the case may be. I never knew what I didn't know. If you would like to study where I have studied and where I continue to study and learn, please check out Yeshivat Shuvu at shuvu.tv. Just write in your browser, shuvu.tv. You will not only see the scriptures and Yeshua in a new light, but you will find a wonderful community where you can build relationships that will last a lifetime. Let me pray for us all. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we come together tonight at the start of this brand new week. I love that you are a God of do-overs. We get a fresh new start every 24-hour period. We get a fresh new start every 7 days. We get to start afresh every 30 days. And even after 12 months, we can begin again with a new year. You truly are a God of new beginnings. I pray that my brothers and sisters, friends and family who are with me here tonight will wake up tomorrow refreshed, strengthened, full of wonder, and ready to begin a new day, a new week. Fill them with courage and hope, reminding them that you have plans for them, plans to make them successful, to give them an awesome future, and to fill their hearts with great hope, because you are our hope. Draw us each closer to you. Help us to remember that we can start again anytime from any place. You are a God who always has your arms outstretched. You are always waiting and ready to receive us when we mess up. I ask you that you keep reminding us of who we truly are. Reveal to each one of us our true identity in Messiah. Whether we are Jew or Gentile, we stand equal in your eyes, though each of us has a unique calling. You teach us that according to Psalm 8, we are created just a little less than you, and that we are the crowning glory of your creation. And in Messiah Yeshua, we can do all that you ask of us. All we need to do is turn our feet toward you, and the moment we set our hearts to do a mitzvah, you send us assistance from heaven. We bless you and we thank you for all you have given us and for all you have done for us. We ask all this in the merit and the zechut of our Messiah Yeshua. Amen. Ve'amen. Ken yehi ratzon. Well, Shavua Tov, my friends. I hope I will see you again soon.
Yeah, man, my name is Jimmy. I come from Jamaica, bro. We're gonna sing Mato Vu. Oh, 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 oh. Mato Vu, Ohalecha Yaakov. בשכנותיך ישראל, מה טובו אוהליך יעקב. משכנותיך ישראל. This comes from the portion of Balak. Bilam thinks he's gonna curse Israel, but really in the end, his plan derails into nothing and it ends up blessing Israel. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Bilam thinks he's bad, he's really good because he blessed Israel instead of putting them in a bad mood. He did not curse them, he did bless them. He blessed them with these words. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Yo, Bilam did not curse Israel, he ended up blessing them with the following words. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. He talked to a donkey, beat it up. He beat it up, but the donkey still loved him a lot and told him a lot. But he ended up being bad. He never turned a new leaf. He ended up being a villain forever and ever and ever and ever. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Everybody listen, gather around. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. Listen to those words. Research them. The translation in English, they are good. Good words Bilam spoke, but he meant to curse Israel. He ended up blessing them instead. The donkey helped a lot, but he still ended up being bad. מה טובו עליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך, מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך תפילותיך, ישראל